a lot of interesting talks. I'm Brigitta Erspalmer from the Institute of Botany, University of Innsbruck. And if we look at the news of today, of these days, you will recognize that the topic, the important topic of climate change, shifted to the background due to the coronavirus. So, fortunately, we can discuss the topic climate change today at this meeting. I'm happy to announce 4 talks dealing with diversity along elevation gradients. And the first talk will be given by Lena Nicklas. She will talk about diversity changes along elevation gradients in the Central and in the Southern Alps. I ask all speakers to stay on time and to watch at the signs, please. Please, Lena.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Brigitta, for the nice introduction. I will stay now, the first talk stay in English. I hope this is okay. Yeah, it's a pleasure for me also to be here again after 2 years and give you more new informations and results on the 2 Gloria sites, the global observation research initiative in alpine regions, where Brigitta and her working group has 2 sites in South Tyrol. And yes, let's start. This Gloria project does standardized monitoring of vegetation changes due to climate change. So we all know climate change is happening and temperatures are increasing quite dramatically. I have here from our 2 sites in the Central and in the Southern Alps temperature from downscaled satellite data, where we see really this drastic increase of 0.5 degrees Celsius per decade, and especially in the alpine living zone. So everything above the tree line temperature has a very important effect, has a strong effect, as the living there is limited by cold temperatures. And as it is warming, species can move upwards. We have a species increase because species are moving upwards, and a thermophilization at summits. And the Gloria project is a worldwide project where summits in all important summit or mountain regions are monitored over the last 15 years. And last time I already showed you this graph. We are observing a species increase, but if we look a little bit more into detail, we have different speed and magnitude of these species increases. So in the Central Alps, we have a little bit less species increases than in the Southern Alps. There is more happening. And we have hot spots of changes, especially this highest mountain in the Southern Alps, where we had 64% more species, and also this in this area of the alpine, in ecotone to alpine to subnival, there are high increases. But we also have cold spots of change, like the lower summits, and also in the Central Alps, the highest summit. And here we ask the question which factors are maybe shaping this, and we hypothesize that the answer may lie in the transects below, and that they can give us an answer to it. We can also see these different changes in the turnover of species, where we have new species and lost species, quite some species in the Southern Alps in comparison to the Central Alps. And also here, this third highest summit has a quite high number of new species. So what did we do in addition to these summits, which are monitored over 15 years, is we also looked at the transects below these summits, and especially we're interested in the species pools, which species are at the southern slopes. So there is a study that the highest, the rich sides of the mountains are the southern and the eastern sides, as there it's warmer, and also more turnover is, all the new species are at the southern sides, and that's why we also concentrated at the southern sides and looked, if there are, which new species could be found along these transects. So the first main interest in this was to determine and compare the species pools between slopes and to determine them at the slopes and compare them to the summits. And we hypothesized that these pools must be bigger in the Southern Alps because there is more going on and more species on there, and that these cold spots of changes might be there where the slopes, where there are not so many more species on the slopes, and these species pools are very similar with the summits. We were also interested if along these transects there are special microsites available which can improve, for example, this moving up, and want to look at or determine potential migrators of the species, and also look at the distribution of the species which are increasing at the summits, for example, which are the winners and the losers, and if there is a connection between the distribution in the transects, if they are very frequently there already. So today I can only show you about this. Maybe in 2 years' time I can tell you more. So I already said we are talking about these 2 Gloria sites in South Tyrol. That's why I'm here today. We are from the University of Innsbruck and very happy to work in this beautiful landscape. And one is in the Central Alps and one in the Southern Alps. So the Central Alps is a siliceous bedrock, and the Southern Alps in the Dolomites. So this Gloria setting also always has summits along an elevational gradient, and here we see these summits along the gradient, which were monitored starting in 2003. They also were monitored in 2011 and 2017, and the Transects we did in 2018. And in the Southern Alps, it already started 2001, and last year we could do the Transects. And as you can see, in the Southern Alps, we only had 3 Transects, so at every summit we tried to go from the summit down to the tree line to get the alpine species pool. But this lowest summit at the Southern Alps is already quite low, and you can't see it, but behind this summit there are the first trees already, so we could not go farther down. And this is already the species pool of this tree line, actually. Yes, so for those who are not so familiar to the Gloria monitoring, I want to introduce you into this multi-summit approach. So at every summit in one region, we have this same protocol. We look at species occurrences in the upper 10 meter of a summit. The summits are always away from tourism and avoid of grazing. And then we have smaller plots in 3 per 3 meter quadrats, which are always 1 square meter at the 5 meter contour line, but also around at each aspect. We look at these summit area sections, the lower and the upper 5 meters. Yes, and we look at all species occurring, and in the square meters we estimate the cover and also the cover of these micro sites like vegetation cover, litter cover, and so on. And now at the Transects, we try to stay a little bit with this setting, and had every 50 meter had this again 3 per 3 meter quadrat with at every edge square meter, a 1 square meter special plot where we estimated again cover and occurrences of species and these microsites, but also to get something like these summit area sections to also find which species are around and not only occurring in this 1 square meter. We also looked at the 9 per 9 meter surrounding, and this we did along a transect, 50 meter long. So here the first results, I haven't had too much time to go through, but to do a lot of statistics, actually no statistics, but we can have a look on quite interesting, get an idea of these pools. We always have the summits with the lower summits down, going up. Here about the whole species pool of the region in the Southern Alps is bigger, we can see, than in the Central Alps. Then it's also quite interesting when we see the species pool or the species pool size. It need not to be that these are really all the same species. Is at the summits extremely high when we take into account everything. So at these summits with the different aspects, there's really in these upper 10 meters, we can really find a high diversity. And interesting is are these differences, how much more species are in the Transect to find, and when you can remember that we did not find so much changes on this lower mountain is actually because there are not so many more species below. And for these hot spots of changes, we can see that in the Transect there is really a big species pool, then not so many species are at the summit. Okay, just a very short overview on the data. These different plot sizes with their summits, with their species numbers. We have in the upper part always the summit, and these are the species numbers, again, the summits up, and can see how the left side is always the square meter plots. Of course, there is not so much space for species, and again, the summits sometimes have quite high species numbers, and also if we look at this summit, for example, where we find quite many changes. We see also in the Transect that there are many more species around which can still arrive, so we can expect many changes there in future. Then if we look at the vegetation cover, is also quite interesting along the summits in comparison to the Transect. We see kind of a calcareous versus siliceous effect, that at the summits in the Southern Alps, we again here have the summits, the vegetation cover is lower than in the Transects below, which makes sense if we think of a calcareous situation, landscape. And in the Central Alps, it's really more like a slowly decrease yes. Okay, this is about the vegetation cover, and I thought that normally I'm talking a lot, so I did not put so many results, but I would have time. Okay, but let's have a summary here. I think you got the impression what our aims are, and it's really still some work to do. And yeah, so for species pools and our hypothesis, what can we say now? I think you all saw that the Southern Alps had a bigger species pool, and that there are already signs, which I showed you, that the species pool is quite important. It's maybe difficult to really get these factors as variables and in statistics. We'll see. Yeah, also with this microsite differences, we already saw a difference between calcareous and siliceous situations, maybe. The potential migrator question and distribution of species I have to leave open by now, but I'm very happy that we have more information on the topic of plant communities along these transects. There we go more into the direction which species are really up there and not only these species numbers. And I'm happy to give over to my master student, Niels, who will tell you then about the plant communities in the Southern Alps. Yes, with this I would like to thank you for your attention and all the helpers, also Iris Trenkwalder, who was the master student helping me with the Dexel group, so the Central Alps, and all for the funding, and you for listening, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Lena. We can have the discussion in English, in German, or in Italian. So please, have you got questions? Yeah?
Yes, thanks for this nice presentation. My name is Franziska Zeimer. So you spoke about an increase of species over the gradients. Now I was wondering whether you have noticed also the disappearance of species who are cold adapted.
Mm-hmm. By now, not so much. So also worldwide, we are or European-wide actually, we are more in the phase of species increase. But for example, yeah, and at the lowest, yeah, maybe we can go back. The strongest decrease in our two. So here, in our two regions was really at this lowest summit, where you can see this very long or a high number of lost species, which was very high, but is not concerning now these very cold adapted species. So we are very at the low size, and it's more the overgrowing of grasses and trees. So what I can say for this, these two spots, but also at Schrankogel, for example, they have a very big Gloria master site, and there they observed a dramatic decrease actually of these very cold adapted species, Ranunculus glacialis, for example, and also that only during the last 10 years these disappearances started now, and not in the first 10 years there were mostly only new species, and now it's also starting these lost species. But however, at the moment, it's not such a big issue at our two sites, but we are looking at it, of course, and that's why it's important to do this monitoring for a long time and yeah, see this.
Okay. Is there another question? Yeah, please.
Christian Körner and his team has shown in Swiss Alps that at high altitudes, a distance of only 8 meters could result in a mean annual temperature differences of 15 degrees. So I would like to ask, in the selection of the sampling plots, which were the criteria? Because small differences in micro relief, etc., could heavily impose on species diversity and also on vegetation cover. What were the criteria of selecting these 3 to 3 meter sampling plots? Because it could be really influential.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. So it's the standard protocol, and you have this diversity, and a very important factor or design point was that it was at every aspect you have one 3 per 3 meter plot, and it's more that you can find it again. So it was really at this aspect at the 5 meters, and it was not so much chosen to get a very homogeneous plot or something like this. But of course, if you always stay at the same plot, you might see more changes than what is really happening, or when is really extinction threat for a species on the summit, because it's a good thing that it can go around from a warmer aspect to a colder aspect, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No more questions, but there is the possibility afterwards to have a short discussion at the end of these sessions. Now I would like to invite Niels Bertol from the Department of Botany, Innsbruck University. He will talk about plant communities along elevational and temporal gradients at the Gloria sites in the Dolomites.